He found himself in the eye of the storm and continued to navigate the ship with courage, determination, and love. Rabbi Avraham Gisser, the Rabbi of Ofra and the chairman of the Mishpatei Eretz Institute, experienced together with all the people of Israel in difficult times in Amona and Ofra. But perhaps it may have been for the best with the regulation law, and it may be a springboard to sovereignty. This is the time and the place to embrace the people of Amona and Ofra for their heroic and inspiring struggle and for their love for the land of Israel. Rabbi Avraham Gisser. Good evening. Indeed, it is very exciting, and we are very grateful when we see this conference, as we understand that the time is ripe. Our hearts are ready, our minds are prepared, and this is the time for action. Congratulations to the organizers and all those who did the work, and all the thanks and gratitude to all of you. After we heard this first lecture, which was so important, we can complement it with a statement: look at the Torah, or look at the law, and indeed the world, and you'll see that it is compatible with the spirit of Judaism and our world in the democratic state of Israel. It has already been stated, and I will say it again, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary since the miraculous Six-Day War and the liberation of Judea and Samaria. Perhaps we should mention a few other dates. Let's start with 3,500 years since the covenant with Abraham, and he made the covenant with him on that day. On that day, God made a covenant with Abraham and said, "To your seed will I give this land." That was the making of the covenant. You know, there's a very fundamental difference between a contract and a covenant. Sometimes we consider them synonyms, a covenant and a contract. But there's a big difference between a contract and a covenant. A contract is a point at which both parties reached because of different interests, contrasting interests. One has an interest in raising the price, the other in lowering the price, and that's the same with every contract. And they reached a compromise. Neither got everything they wanted, and they signed a contract, an agreement that expresses this reciprocal concessions, or one side perhaps conceded more than the other for different reasons. A covenant is not a contract or a compromise agreement. A covenant is like a marriage, the covenant of marriage. She will be the wife of your covenant, it says. A covenant is like photosynthesis in the world between the various substances that give life and make life. A covenant ultimately means I will give you everything you need, and you will give me everything I need. And that's why we both create something complete. That is a covenant. And that is why the making of a covenant, when God makes a covenant and says to Abraham, "To your seed will I give this land," ultimately, I'm giving the land everything it needs. I'm giving you, of Abraham and your seed, everything you need, and I too, in the heavens, am receiving everything that I need as a result of this covenant. That is a covenant. And so we have 3,500 years since that covenant. And if we go to the newer age, we have 220 years since the major Aliyot, which marked the revival of the students of the Gra and the Baal Shem Tov, and we have 120 years, about almost exactly, since the political and practical Zionism was born, and we have 100 years since the Balfour Declaration, and we have 68 years since the birth of the State of Israel, and 50 years since we have Judea and Samaria. the liberation and capture of very important parts of the land of Israel. Indeed, after all these numbers, the time for sovereignty has come. There's just one tiny problem, that the Prime Minister, not necessarily this one, they live on Balfour Street. And that's 100 years ago. And that's really the problem, because the Balfour Declaration was very, very great in its time, like the Declaration of Cyrus, and it also was the basis for international law in the League of Nations and the mandate. But nevertheless, the Balfour Declaration ultimately remained a declaration for an exiled, wandering people that needed to find a home. And it's true, and we know that the people of Israel need a home, a place where they will be protected and safe. There's a great deal of Jewish rescue in it and very little of Jewish identity and action. The demand for sovereignty we base on two major principles which the State of Israel already contains: Judaism and democracy and human rights. These two principles, and here we will once again mention, not for the last time, on the contrary, on this evening, my dear, good friend, teacher, our friend and member of Ofra, the late Uri Elitzur, who I think founded in his final years the basis in the public awareness, the morality of sovereignty based on these two principles, on the fulfillment of Judaism fully and of democracy fully, of morality and justice and human rights. Because sovereignty, according to Uri Elitzur, brings with it civil rights and human rights and full rights for the Arab individual living under our sovereignty. And it has already been mentioned, that which is self-evident, and Ribono Shel Olam, the Lord, is the sovereign of all the earth, and we, as His chosen people, we are faithful to our sovereign mission in this world, which is the demand for morality and justice. God presents Himself in only one place as He who loves, in the Shmoneh Esrei prayer. It says, Melech ohev tzedakah u'mishpat, a king, a monarch who loves justice and law. And so on that basis we demand sovereignty. And the basis, this so important basis for the demand for sovereignty, should of course rule out the vision or the illusion of the two-state solution. And let us set out a number of points. The two-state solution is primarily based on fear. Fear, almost racist fear. You saw just 3 weeks ago, a month ago, a huge campaign on billboards, which was immediately removed because they realized the disgrace of that campaign of the left that sought to energize and advance the two-state solution, which was entirely based on they're frightening us that there are Arabs living here. They're trying to scare us that Arabic will be spoken somewhere. They're trying to scare us that we will have Arab citizens in Israel. Fear. Fear that is ultimately not just a security fear, but just remove them from my sight. I don't want to see them. I don't want to live anywhere near them. And I say to you that here in this room is the most tolerant and the most respectful and the most the people that most recognize the rights and needs of Arabs to have an egalitarian, just, civil lifestyle. We're not afraid Because the fear, once again, comes from that diaspora drive to find a ghetto with high walls, a kind of a more sophisticated Balfour Declaration for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. We are not afraid. The two-state solution is based only on fear and, of course, on racism. And that same awful image of a villa in the jungle. We will build a villa in the jungle. He who builds villa in the jungle will be like South Africa in the end. There too, there were a lot of villas in the jungle. And today, all the people that lived in those villas, either they're armed to the teeth or they've left South Africa, because you cannot remain forever a villa in the jungle. It runs counter to common sense and morality and justice and history. And because we have a covenant, so I'll go back to that principle, and for the benefit of the Arab people too, the people of Israel will give them what they need in the land of Israel too. That is for the benefit of all the nations and all the citizens living in Israel. The second fear, or the second principle upon which the two-state solution is based, is the removal of responsibility from this area. And that's the same idea of villa in the jungle. I don't care what's happening outside the walls of the villa. Let them kill one another. Let them murder one another. Let them oppress freedom. Let them oppress women. Let them take away freedom of choice. Let them have a regime of terror like in Gaza. I don't care. It's not us, but the Jewish people can't do that. The Jewish people don't have the right to entertain such thoughts. Abraham received a promise and a covenant. Through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And that was said to him when he was commanded to come to the land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and you will be blessed. And through you will all the nations of the earth be blessed. In other words, Abraham doesn't have a particular nationalist vision, and Rav Kook talks about this many times, and in one place, especially in Enaya, at the end of the Tractate of Brachot. We don't have nationalism like all the other peoples. We don't have a national mission like all the other missions. Our national mission and task is universal, to bring blessing to the earth. And that is why the children and descendants of Abraham and God arranged it so that other sons would be living here one way or another. We can't say why and how that happens, but we have the descendants of Ishmael, who is also descended from Abraham, and we have a duty to bring blessing to all the descendants of Abraham, certainly of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And perhaps a third pillar underlies the very problematic pillar, underlies the so-called two-state solution. The third pillar is the removal of responsibility from our Judaism, and that's the scariest thing. Why? Because we want a Jewish state. So how can we keep it Jewish? There won't be any foreigners in it. There won't be any Arabs in it. And that will keep us from assimilating, and that will keep us from a lot of other problems and security problems. There won't be Arabs, so there won't be terrorist attacks. That was thought to be a very racist idea at one time, but that's what underlies the idea. But the idea is indeed to remove responsibility from my Judaism. I will remain Jewish, and my son and my children will marry Jews and grandchildren, and they'll remain Jewish simply because there won't be anybody else here. And if there is, there'll be very few of them, and there won't be a competition for a marriage or anything like that. And that is escaping your Jewish responsibility. A person, the more Jewish he is, the less he is afraid of losing his Jewish identity when there are people who are not Jewish around him. Why am I so frightened to be a Jew who observes the commandments, who is God-fearing, or at the least filled with active Jewish identity and an identity that is devotive and is creative, if I know what my loyalty is to my identity, why should I be afraid of others? And that's why I'll tell you a story from the days of the disengagement. At that time, I participated in a number of panels in the Israel Democracy Institute, and they talked about that the disengagement would strengthen the Jewishness of the state. How? By the fact that we won't have anything to do with, we'll have less to do with fewer Arabs. And I suggested to them, it was just, you know, I was kind of toying with a theoretical idea. Let's see if this is a serious argument. I'm willing to give up territory in return for Judaism. At first, everybody was surprised. What do you mean Judaism in return, territories in return for Judaism? Territories in return for peace, that's passé already. It doesn't, you know, that doesn't make sense. It's, for many years, people realized that. But what do you mean territory in return for Judaism? I said, okay, let's pass a serious Shabbat law. Something that involves the whole state. We'll close all the commerce, we'll close all the shops in Tel Aviv, and all many other types of laws and that, in order for us to have a clearly Jewish state, that the Jewish state is growing stronger. You're talking about strengthening the Jewish identity of the state, or the Jewishness of the state, and other examples of that nature. At first they said, that's an interesting idea. You think that that could work? You think that could support the idea, that idea among religious people? I said, yes, I think at least it would show that Judaism is important to you. The idea came up and fell after one or two discussions. No one is willing to strengthen Jewish identity in practical terms through laws or committed Jewish identity. Of course, everybody likes Judaism, and there's a huge renaissance of the Jewish world among us. But I want you to know that some of the idea of two states is based on the fact that that will enable me not to take responsibility for my Judaism, and that is why a single country under Jewish sovereignty with a large Arab minority is a huge responsibility and a huge commitment. And I have to say that we can't take responsibility for things that we're not committed to. Don't say things will be quiet and then I'll worry about my Judaism. No, you'll never find the time if you're not really committed to it. And full comprehensive sovereignty over all the land is a commitment to our Jewish foundation, because that's what the Torah commands us, and our heritage and the return to Zion. That's what it says, to return to Zion in love out of the sources of the Torah and Judaism. That is the true return to Zion. That is moving out of Balfour Street and entering into Independence Street. My time is almost up, but I would like to enumerate a few more brief points. When we say it's time for sovereignty, we mean that we need to look up more, to move beyond the here and now, which is very important, and that is to look up. And that's what we read yesterday in the Torah, at the war at Amalek, to look upward. Did Moses' hands make war? No, but when Israel looks upward, to look upward, what does the vision that the state of Israel will have in its 70th anniversary, which is very, very close next year? What will we have in our 100th anniversary? The vision we will have on our 100th year, from 70th year and so on, is indeed to look upward, to look at the level of sovereignty, of control, of full fulfillment, because the Zionist vision as it is today is facing many, many anti-Zionist people, from those who want a new Israel and those who are actually anti-Zionist. And if we don't set a vision that is above us, we won't be. And so this vision is based on justice, on equality, that Israel is a success story, that demographics are working in our favor. I believe that with all my heart. We have millions more who will make Aliyah from the United States until we are 2/3 to 80% here. Aliyah from the U.S. is a necessity, and when we stop frightening ourselves, what will happen when we declare sovereignty? The Arab world, in other words, the Arabs in Israel, will undergo a process of Israelization. We'll hear different leaders, we'll hear different voices, and above all, we'll stop the occupation, because that's an abnormal situation. We will be sovereigns in our land. We'll stop occupation, we'll stop discrimination, and we'll reach morality, justice, and equality. And we will have a great help from Hashem in this day soon. He's good.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Avraham Gisser.